You're basically doing direct marketing to wholesalers on a weekly basis so that you become, in their mind, the subject to person who they're going to go to when eventually they get that deal that they can't wholesale. They're going to come to you because you have ingrained yourself in their mind. That's what we're trying to do when building relationships with wholesalers. All right, welcome back to Sub 2 Investor. My name is Hans, and in this episode, I am telling you 3 reasons why using wholesalers to find subject to deals is a bad idea. I'm also going to talk about why it's a good idea and give you some tips on how to do it and how we landed our 3rd subject to deal doing so. You're going to get the inside scoop in this episode. Now, this is part of my real subject to deal breakdown series where I'm going through actual live subject to deals that I've closed so that you can see the ins and outs from beginning to end, actual subject to deals and how we executed them. So just a quick background, this was our 3rd deal. At this point, we had proven the concept of subject to. Having done 2 subsequent deals, it started to become apparent to me that there were sellers out there who did need my help and that the majority of wholesalers, flippers, real estate agents weren't going to be able to help these individuals. Now, I was being told that one marketing channel that works well is to get in touch with local wholesalers in your market and let them know that you are buying houses subject to. So what I did was I got on Facebook, and in our local market, there are about a half a dozen to maybe even a dozen Facebook groups dedicated for investors and wholesalers. And so I just was letting everybody know that I was looking for subject to deals, in particular, deals with low equity, which they couldn't wholesale or flip. And the way that I phrased this was, hey, if you have any dead leads, motivated sellers who don't have equity, let me know. I might be able to monetize those for you. And what we actually did was we went into our CRM, dialed in a workflow of about 50 text messages that were going to be sent over the course of 2 to 3 years. Weekly, bi-weekly, we would vary up the duration. But these text messages would say something to the effect of, hey, do you have any deals with low equity right now? Hi, just a reminder that we can pay a small referral fee for any dead leads that you can't wholesale or flip. Just simple messages like that. And if you don't have a CRM to automate this process, then just the good old-fashioned elbow grease, as it were, go into the Facebook groups, friend request every single wholesaler that you see commenting, send them a DM, letting them know that you are the creative person in your market. Well, that's what we did on this particular deal. And I would highly recommend get on the phone and explain to them exactly what you are looking for. And this leads into now the 3 reasons why using wholesalers to find sub 2 deals is a bad idea. Now, that's tongue-in-cheek. It's a little clickbaity. I get it. But here are 3 reasons why I don't like working with wholesalers. Let's put it to you that way. So the first reason is that you must educate the wholesaler. You have to take time out of your day, out of your busy work schedule, to get on the phone and to have lengthy conversations where you're describing your buy box. It's going to take multiple iterations of you explaining exactly what you're looking for before they get the picture. And so, for example, there's somebody who wholesales in our market a lot, and they'll send me a sub 2 deal, but this will be a deal that's like, it's a full gut rehab. And the mortgage balance is like $10,000, but it needs $90,000 of work. What's the point of having a sub 2 deal if I need to go borrow hard money for a rehab and pay 12 points or 15 points on that, on $100,000 for rehab? This isn't a very attractive subject to deal for me. So you have to continually beat the drum and just clarify your buy box. So for us, our buy box is going to be something like, hey, I'm looking for houses in A and B class neighborhoods, no rental areas. The houses need to be in pretty good shape, pretty close to move-in ready, no major rehabs. The seller needs to be motivated, but they can't sell their house as to a cash investor because their mortgage balance is too high. So if you say that, that's a very specific criteria that a wholesaler will eventually lodge in their head, and when they come across that seller, they're going to think of you. You're basically doing direct marketing to wholesalers on a weekly basis so that you become, in their mind, the subject to person who they're going to go to when eventually they get that deal that they can't wholesale. They're going to come to you because you have ingrained yourself in their mind. That's what we're trying to do when building relationships with wholesalers. Now, it really only takes a handful of committed wholesalers who you build solid relationships with to begin building a pipeline of steady lead flow to give you a successful sub-2 investing career. But it takes time and energy and a lot of frustration if there's not so much understanding when you're trying to explain creative financing. Let me be clear, I'm not blaming any wholesaler or wholesalers in general for not understanding what we do as creative finance investors. It's hard to wrap your head around some of these concepts if you're not doing them on the daily. This is just part of the game if you're going to be using wholesalers to source deals. Reason number 2, and this is a bit more concerning to me and an annoyance, and this is that wholesalers are asking ridiculously high fees for low equity subject to deals. Now, I understand there's value in a low interest mortgage payment. However, there is extreme risk in taking on a house and taking down a house with low equity. What's your backup plan? You can't refinance a house with like 90% loan to value. You can't go do a DSCR refinance on that. No hard money lender is going to touch that. What are you going to do if the market dips? You are in a vulnerable position taking on low equity properties, and wholesalers need to understand that. Make it clear that, hey, I would prefer to have equity. When I talk to sellers, I say the same thing. Look, Mr. Seller, and in this case, look, Mr. Wholesaler, I would rather have a deal with high equity, lots of equity, because that gives me options. If crap hits the fan and I need to sell or refinance, I can do it because I have a ton of equity. And when you have equity, you have lots of options. When you have no equity, you have very few and limited options. And the options you do have need to be executed with precision, care, and expertise, which I guarantee you very few investors have. So, the value that you're bringing is that you can actually close those deals with low equity, get the wholesaler a fee, get the seller out of their property, but you're adding tremendous value by taking on that risk. You shouldn't get punished for taking that risk on. You should get rewarded. And the wholesaler should understand that a $20,000 wholesale fee, if a house is worth $200 and it has a loan for $185 and the wholesaler is asking $20,000 for a wholesale fee, you're supposed to go into negative equity and take on that risk. Even $10,000, you have $5,000 of equity, which is really not even true because you couldn't sell the house on the market because you have realtor commissions, which are 6%. On average, 9% of the sales price comprises closing costs. So you're actually still in negative equity territory. You can structure wholesale fees creatively. This is a pro tip. You have to convince the wholesaler to take funds on the back end. If you're going to need to dump $10,000 into a make-ready rehab to get this thing marketable for sale, well then, if you can only collect a $10,000 option fee or a $15,000 down payment, you're going to be cash in that deal after holding costs and closing costs, so you're not going to be able to give that wholesaler much money. And so I would just suggest explaining that to the wholesaler. So maybe Mr. Wholesaler or Mrs. Wholesaler, I'd give you $1,500 at closing, and would you take monthly payments for a certain period of time or a balloon payment after X amount of months or years? After I've made some money from this deal and not just been negative in a crap low equity deal. Reason 3, wholesalers often want too much control over the subject to deals because they have a contract on them. If they've never done creative deals or sub-2 deal, then it's going to be a train wreck. Let's face it. My first subject to deal, I was literally blessed by God that it worked out, and it very easily could have turned to crap and fallen apart last minute. And when you're first starting out, you're going to make mistakes in how you present subject to sellers. Probably some of those deals are going to fall apart because of it, and the seller is going to have misconceptions about exactly the nature of the transaction. I will not close a subject to deal unless I can speak to the seller directly and let them know exactly what's going on, and I need to be able to use my documents, my purchase contracts, and my disclosures at closing if I'm going to do a subject to deal. And I've worked with some awesome wholesalers. I think I need to reiterate that point. But I've worked with some who want control of the deal. They don't want me to go to the house without them to talk to the seller, and they want to kind of like shadow me the entire time. It's kind of annoying because I have this skill set that I've developed and I need to be able to utilize it to do the deal. Maybe there's something to learn if you step back and watch, and maybe that's enough value, honestly. Then maybe you're going to want to go do one of these deals yourself on your own. Let's not get too cocky here. I make mistakes, and sometimes wholesalers are better salesmen than I am, or saleswomen than I am, and so they can present an idea better than I can, or make a seller feel more comfortable. However, with subject to, it is such a relationship of trust and rapport that's built. It's a very sensitive transaction. I don't know how else to put it, but I need to be in control of that, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for making those mortgage payments. Not only that, I'm responsible for this individual's credit. It just can't go wrong. I can't afford it to go wrong. So, I'm happy to surrender control to a seasoned wholesaler who is on the exact same page as I am and can sort of drive the deal forward and let me use my paperwork and communicate with the seller if I need to. Fantastic. But with kind of the more novice or amateur wholesalers, I really need to be in control of doing the deal. I won't do a deal unless I can do it directly with the seller. I'd rather just give the wholesaler a referral fee and step out of the deal and draft up a new contract with the seller. Anyways, let's get to the actual conversation I had with the seller on my third subject to deal, and I'll show you how it went down. All right, so let me show you this conversation that I had with the wholesaler that ended up leading to our third subject to deal, and I'll give you a little bit of the story of how this deal materialized. So I reached out to the wholesaler on Facebook Messenger. I said, "What's up, man? I see you post a lot on the investor groups and just wanted to reach out to see if you ever come across any leads where the owners want to sell but don't have enough equity to wholesale or flip." Well, that's my little catch line there, if you will. The individual says, "I do sometimes." So I said, "Cool. Do you have anyone you're passing those leads off to yet?" Notice that I insinuate that he should be passing these dead leads off to somebody. And so have you found anybody to pass those leads off to yet? We're looking to partner with a few wholesalers who aren't doing anything with those leads. If we can convert them doing a sub 2, then we'd be happy to pay you a fee. He says, "Sounds interesting. What's the fee?" Natural question to ask. I have one right now in St. Charles under contract. Negotiable, but depends on how good a lead it is. Probably between 1 to 5K. I'm looking at this as more of a referral fee rather than an assignment fee, because I plan to do the deal myself, and unless he's going to structure the whole thing, get the paperwork together and have it at the closing table, I feel like a smaller fee for just a referral for the lead is reasonable. So I say, "What's the numbers on the St. Charles deal?" He says that he owes $130 but wants $140, and it needs $45,000 in work, and the ARV is $190. I can't wholesale it. Boom. That's exactly the kind of thing that you're looking for when you're reaching out to wholesalers. Probably needs more than 45K. Might be able to do a sub 2 with him. He wants to move to Texas ASAP. Boom. I like that he's providing me the motivation of the seller. He wants to move out of state as soon as possible. And so that gives me a sense of urgency. I'll take 4K. I have a partner. So he's suggesting a 4K assignment fee, which it might be reasonable depending on the level of work here or if the seller owes anything in mortgage payments. When I initially read this, I wasn't super excited about it because 45K in work exceeded my budget for doing a rehab. But now in the back of my mind, I was thinking wholesalers are typically thinking that a rehabber is going to do everything to a house. And so if everything means $45K, well, then maybe I could get away with $20K or even less just to get it rent ready and sold on a lease purchase or a contract for deed. But in the wholesaler's mind, the mortgage balance is $130 plus $45K, so then that brings it to $175. The seller wants $10, so that brings it to $185. And if the ARV is only $190, there's obviously no equity. There's no juice in the deal. Plus to pay the wholesaler fee on top of that. That's like zero equity, right? So he sends me photos, which is great. I make a joke that the bathroom is gross, LOL. The backyard is literally a forest, which it was. He never cuts the grass in years. The weeds are about 8 feet tall. Yikes, any idea where the water in the basement's coming from? That was off of the photos that he sent me. Hot water tank, that's generally a positive. A hot water tank, $1,500 to replace rather than a foundation issue. Let me look into this tonight and get back to you. What's his motivation for moving? Might be interested. And he says that his job is the motivation. So apparently he needs to move out of state for a new job, but he doesn't have any equity. So that is sort of a perfect tee up for a subject to. So then I say, how's access? When can I get over there? And he says, I can set it up, which is great. This wholesaler is doing a fantastic job working with me. In fact, this wholesaler, let me just say this right now, is a really great wholesaler, and we continue to work together to this day. So a lot of the things that I say in this video about why I don't like working with wholesalers for subject to deals don't apply to this particular individual, and they were really great to work with. So I just want to give him his due. So he says, let me check my availability around 1 p.m. So we're just trying to set up an appointment here. Anytime Wednesday morning works as well. Now, I say any word, he says not yet, and then here's where everything kind of fell apart in terms of me working with the wholesaler. Basically, the wholesaler just drops off the map here, and so I had to take matters into my own hands. So I sent that message on September 28th, asking for specific times to set up an appointment, and then I say on October 1st, hey, any updates? No answer for an hour, so I say, can I reach out to the seller directly? And then 6 days later, I hadn't heard from him, and so I sent a question mark. And then I still don't hear from him until almost a month after that initial trying to schedule something with the seller to see the property. So he finally responds back over 20 days later, oh, sorry, I didn't know you reached back out to me, but yeah, go ahead. So then he gives me permission to reach out to the seller. Time is of the essence. Obviously, he's saying that the seller needs to move ASAP, his job, yada, yada, yada. And if I can't get access to the house, and if this wholesaler can't sell it, well, I'm going to go to the seller and see what's going on. So I went to the seller. I think I skip traced him. I called him, I got a hold of him, and he told me he wasn't under contract anymore. And so I went over there, I looked at the house, I started talking, and I pitched subject to him. He was open and receptive, and so we got a contract. And so we ended up closing this deal in November. And in fact, the next message I sent was shortly after closing. I think we closed this in November 21st, and then on December 8th, a couple weeks later, I reached back out to the wholesaler to let him know we closed the deal, and that I was going to be sending him a referral thank you for the lead. So I say, hey, we closed the deal. We'll get you a fee once we place a buyer and recoup some money from the deal, aiming for late July. Had to put more cash out than anticipated. Just wanted to give you a heads up. So I'm just throwing out here, hey, I'm planning to get you a fee in July when we place a tenant or a buyer, and then we'll have recouped some cash and we can pay you a fee. He says, okay, great. Was the fee $5,000? I have a partner I have to split it with. He went up from 4 to 5. We had never even agreed on a fee because I told him 1 to 5. So somehow we got 5 in his head. I told him probably not that much, but I'll get with my partner and let you know. In January, he says he's actually checking in with me now, right? Because there's money on the table. I could have just not said anything to him that we closed the deal and been totally anonymous, but I thought it was the right thing to do to let him know. And I tell him that we're nearly finishing the rehab, going a little slower than expected. We sell on seller financing, so our plan is to send you a referral fee once we collect a down payment from the buyer. Most likely be 2 to 3 weeks. What's a good address for you? So he gives me his address, and then I say, thanks for your patience. And again, this wholesaler was awesome. He was very understanding. He was willing to wait for the wholesale fee. Then I sent him the check. I think it was for $1,500 is what we decided was a reasonable referral fee. We had dumped some more money into this property than we anticipated. And so he says, hey, Hans, I got the check. Thanks again. I'll be sending a lot more. So just note that he is very happy about the $1,500 that we sent, because in his mind, the seller probably went dark. He didn't hear from him. He didn't think I was going to be able to close. And then all of a sudden, I come in saying, hey, I actually closed the deal and I'm actually going to be sending you money. I would be happy too if I were him, and this dead lead turned into income. So he's happy. And I said, yeah, awesome. Looks like you guys are busy over there. Nice work. I'm happy to do more subject to deals with you in the future. So I asked for his phone numbers. Now this is so that I can put him in my workflow, which automatically texts him to see if he has any low equity leads. So then he must have talked with a business partner who wanted him to say this, is my guess. He says, hey, Hans, seems to be a little miscommunication between my partner and I. We were expecting a little bit more than $1,500. $750 a piece is not worth it. I see I originally asked for $5,000 and even $4,000 after the fact. We need at least a minimum of $3,000. That's at least $1,500 a piece for us. Now, that was a curveball, given that he was totally happy with $1,500 when he got the check in the mail. But I understand where he's coming from. The expectations were not set out clearly from the get-go, right? I said 1 to 5, depending on the numbers. He said I'd like 4, and then I guess he changed his mind and said I want 5. I hadn't explained to him all the money we had to put into the property, which we most likely were not going to recapture when we placed a buyer. And so in my mind, hey man, just be happy that you got some money from this lead, which wasn't going to turn into anything for you. So here's how I responded to him. I said, hey man, I get that. I talked about it with my partner and we're looking at it as a referral fee, not as an assignment fee, because we needed to reach out to the seller and go lock it up ourselves a month after y'all told us about the lead. I think I tried reaching out to you a few times to set something up with the seller, but I didn't hear anything back. Anyway, then we had to help the seller to do a loan modification to make taking over those payments even feasible, because he was behind on payments. In fact, this deal would not have worked if there wasn't somebody who had the knowledge of how to do a loan modification, come in, do the loan mod, then take over the payment. So this was a long process before we could even get to the closing table, right? Which the wholesaler is just totally unaware of. But the way that the wholesaler had it under contract with all those arrears that we would have to pay plus the rehab, this deal makes absolutely zero sense. So we had to do the loan modification to even make sub 2 feasible. Then we had to pay him a fee for moving costs and closing costs ourselves. And the other factor is that it depends on the numbers with subject to. Once we looked into them with all the late payments, he actually owed more. He owed $137 and not $130. So the mortgage balance was off, that the wholesaler told me. So now we're even in more of a low equity and vulnerable position. So the house had even less equity than we thought. The same deal without all the late payments would have given us more equity and a larger fee would be feasible. Sorry for the long-winded response, but that's where we're coming from. So I tried to lay out the reasons why the fee was so small, and then he responded quite gracefully, let's be clear in our communication going forward, no big deal, which was a super graceful response. But when you're reaching out to wholesalers and they're sending you their dead leads, what does it cost them to send you a dead lead? It's just like, here's the name and an address of a motivated seller whose house I can't do anything with. If you do something with it, hey, send me $1,500. That covers my marketing costs. In my mind, that's totally reasonable way of looking at it. We had to lock up the deal. We had to talk to the seller. We had to do a loan modification to make sub 2 even possible. The mortgage balance and the information was off. We had to rehab the property. I love wholesalers. I'm so glad that this individual brought us this lead. But this is just part of the business. If you're going to source free leads from wholesalers, and I guess if there's any takeaway from this long-winded video, it's that wholesaler leads for sub 2 deals are not free. You end up paying a price, whether it be time, emotional energy, a referral or an assignment fee, or a frustrated relationship. You end up paying a price, and sometimes it's just simpler to deal directly with the seller when doing subject to transactions, and that's actually my preferred method of marketing. It's, old school marketing, direct to seller, direct mail, calling. That way there's no middleman. There's a lot lesser of a chance of miscommunication all across the board. What do you think about this? I'm really curious. Do you actually like working with wholesalers to bring you subject to deals? Is there something that I'm missing? Are you a wholesaler? Are you angry at me for this video? Did I misrepresent your viewpoint? If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Since this is a new channel, I'm trying to provide as much valuable content for free as possible. So please just take a quick second, hit that like button. Stay tuned to see the numbers on that deal and how we did the loan modification with the seller, which is a fantastic strategy. Stay tuned to find out. Until then, stay creative and peace.